Okay, good morning, year five. Fantastic Monday morning. I hope you all had a really good weekend. It's snowing heavily where I live outside at the moment, so it's very cold. Ordell has just been for a very long walk and has had a shower. Mabel is on the table. She's just right behind the laptop, so if you hear any kind of bangs or anything like that, it's Mabel. Ordell snoring in the corner. Right, guys, let's begin. So today we're going to be looking at some spellings ending with the suffix ship. Okay, so all of our spellings end with ship. Now let's have a look. Some of these words are going to be really useful for your writing this week. So our extended write is going to be for you to create your own speech as one of the characters from the book. So have a look at the words. The words that I've marked in red are ones that I think I could use in my own speech this week. Okay, so I'll read them through. You can write them down. We usually write them down 3 or 4 times. The first one is membership. The next one is ownership. And we've got partnership, dictatorship, we've got championship, fellowship, apprenticeship, citizenship, craftsmanship, and sponsorship. Okay, so your task, if you don't know the meaning of any of those words, grab a dictionary or go online or speak to an adult about any of the words that you don't know the meaning of. Okay, right, fab. Let's move on. So what we're going to do today and tomorrow, we're doing very similar lessons. We're going to analyse main characters through their personality and their actions. So we're going to look very closely at characters and make some decisions, gather some ideas about how they behave and why they behave in a particular way. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to be focusing today and tomorrow on Zoe and one other character that we're going to meet in today's reading. We'll try and find out more about their pasts, their current situation, and their ambitions or their dreams or their hopes for the future. Okay, and that's what we're really going to be basing our speeches on this week. So we've got to come up with a little bit of creative thinking and use our imaginations as well. Right, so we will be creating speeches that reflect their personalities, and we're going to try and persuade the people of Eel Island to support their ideas or role as a leader. So your speech is a persuasive speech. You have got to try and persuade people to follow your character, whichever one that you choose. The island has become political and people are starting to have different opinions about its future. Okay, so we're going to be studying 2 characters, Zoe, and it looks like possibly a boy or a man. Let's find out. So we've got Zoe and we've got this other character. We're going to be writing in role, so in the role of these 2 characters. So what I'd like you to do today, you can either use the resources and print out a silhouette or a shadow like we've got on the screen, or you could just draw your own person to represent both of those characters. So this is what we're going to focus on. What are their personalities? How do they behave towards other people? What do you know about their lives? What do you think their hopes for the future might be? And how would you describe them physically. Okay, so we're going to be doing that for 2 days. We've got 2 chapters that we're going to read, and we're going to add to our lists as we go. Okay, so let's find out. So those are the questions we need to be thinking about. The text is in the resources, so if you need that, you might want to grab yourself a piece of paper to make some notes, or pause the video now and either draw your characters or use your resource to write around. And obviously you can go back through the video and stop it as we go along. So, to our book. This is called One. "What are you?" said one of them. "Cats?" Zoe sat in the wet mud where the 3 had thrown her. She'd only been out of her boat for a little while before they'd jumped her. Her head rang from a fierce blow, and she felt confused. She was exhausted from rowing for so long. "Nah, she's not Cats," said another. He was tiny, much shorter than Zoe. "Cats are afraid of water, right? Reckon she's Pigs. She looks good in the mud, anyhow." The third of them laughed. "What are you, Pigs?" said the first one again. He was obviously in charge. He was good-looking, short, though not as small as the little mouse-like one. Zoe looked at them dumbly. They weren't making any sense. "Let's just scrag her anyway," said the third. Their leader ignored this. He turned to Zoe again. "Look, we're eels, see? Eels. This is our place. So what are you?" Zoe's head sang with pain, but she dimly understood what they were getting at. "I'm not from here. I'm from Norwich, or what's left of it." They eyed her silently. "She's lying," said the third. He looked stupid and mean. "Let's scrag her. She's Cats, I'm telling you. Or Pigs. Either way, let's just do her." "Shut it, Spat," shouted the leader. "Sorry, Doobie." Spat looked suddenly timid. Doobie turned to Zoe. "You're from over the water." He said it slowly, suspiciously. At last, Zoe fully understood something they were saying. "Yes, I'm from Norwich, but it's terrible there. There's hardly anyone left. They all went years ago. Some of us stayed and tried to make it work, but it's all over now." Doobie seemed to ignore most of this, but he said, "You've got a boat then?" "Yes, it's down... yes, I have." Something stopped Zoe from telling them where she'd hidden it. Not for the first time, she wondered if leaving Norwich was the right thing to do, but then she had no choice in the end. "A boat?" said the mouse-like one. "Yeah, I heard it, Munchkin," said Doobie. He turned back to Zoe. "Show us your boat then." Zoe hesitated. "Or we'll scrag you properly," said Spat. Zoe looked at Doobie. He seemed to be the boss. "Spat's right," he said. They stood looking at Zoe's tiny rowing boat. She'd been lucky. She'd headed straight towards the island and had found a good place to land. She wouldn't have been able to go any further anyway. Then she dragged the boat up as far as she could, tucking it out of sight beneath a huge old tree that had its feet in the water. It was dying, but it had enough leaves left on it to hide her little boat a little. It was as good as she could do. She'd decided to walk along the shore and find an easy way up to the cathedral. And then, coming around the corner of a ruined building, her luck ran out. She walked slap into Doobie, Spat and Munchkin. "You came from Norwich in that?" said Doobie, looking at the boat and shaking his head. "Uh-huh," Zoe mumbled. "What does it say on the side?" "Leica," said Zoe. "It's her name." "Norwich is east, right? The big old city?" "Yes, so?" asked Zoe, wanting some answers. She wanted to know where she was, and she was very hungry. "You don't understand, do you? What's your name?" "Zoe." Where am I? I just headed for that. This is the island of the eels, and we're the eels, see? This is our island, and we're in charge. Now, Zoe, what we're wondering is whether you're telling the truth, whether you really come across Udan Adan in that. He pointed at Zoe's little boat. Norwich, you say? I didn't think there was anything left to the east. On the other hand, you might be cats, or pigs, or some other tribe, in which case you've come to try something on. Steal some food, maybe. Knock a few of us off too, maybe. So which is it? Cats, pigs, horses, or is this story of yours for real? Zoe wondered how she could convince them and what would happen if she failed. Look, I've never heard of pigs or eels or anything. Norwich is lost now. I found this old boat and did it up. I just started to row. I ran out of food, don't know when. Then I saw that thing sticking out of the water. Zoe pointed over their heads, where behind them the huge old cathedral towered into the watery sky. Even though she had stood on the land where it did, it still looked as if it was floating on the water that was all around them. I just kept rowing. It never seemed to get any closer, but I got here. So you're not cats then? Said Munchkin. We don't know that, said Spat. No, said Doobie, but I believe her. So you don't belong to any of the tribes? No, said Zoe. Well, you do now, said Doobie. As of now, you're an eel. We could do with someone as smart as you. Smart? Said Spat. Yes, Spat, smart. Smarter than you, anyway. Get all this way in that thing. She's got brains, which are in short supply around here. So what? Said Spat. He stared straight at Zoe. No one else has joined us before, have they? You always said it was dangerous. Why don't we just do like we did with everyone else who's come snooping? You said, don't tell me what I said, Spat. Zoe saw Munchkin take a couple of steps away from the other two automatically. Yeah, but Doobie, we always do 'em, don't we? You said so. I said, shut it. Doobie snapped at Spat. There was an uneasy silence for a while. Spat seemed to realise he'd pushed it a bit and shrugged his shoulders. Zoe saw the anger slip off Doobie's face. Thank you, Spat. Anyway, you're not afraid of a girl, are you? Munchkin sniggered, obviously pleased with himself. Doobie turned back to Zoe. So you're an eel now, Zoe? But I don't... I said you're an eel. No arguments, unless you'd like to give the water a try without your boat. Zoe shook her head slowly. She was too tired and hungry to argue anyway. She didn't even have the energy to wonder what sort of weird setup she had walked into. Let's go back to base then, lads. They walked up the soggy hill to where the ruins of the old stone walls appeared from the sea and led to the cathedral gates. Rising out of the water beside one of these old walls was a row of white posts. They made their way in and around bits of fallen masonry, and then, not long after, the main door to the cathedral was in front of them. It looked out across a large patch of muddy grass, in one corner of which stood an ancient cannon. Two boys stood guarding the gateway. Past them was a long porch which led to the doors themselves. These had been reinforced with bands of metal and beams of wood. The two gatekeepers nodded at Doobie meekly, though they were much bigger than him. All right, Doobie, said one, and the other nodded. Neither smiled. One of them shoved hard, and the door to the cathedral swung open. Well, Zoe, said Doobie, welcome to hell. Zoe had seen some unpleasant sights before, but nothing in Norwich was like this. Once more she began to wonder if she'd done the right thing in leaving at all. Huddled in small groups around smoking fires were the scraps of people. Their clothes were hardly more than rags, and were obviously the result of some fairly primitive sewing skills. Doobie and his two thugs were dressed like kings compared with the others in the cathedral. Zoe looked at her own clothes. She'd mended and patched them countless times, but they seemed almost new now. Once inside, Doobie turned to Spat and Munchkin. "You've got things to do," he said, and they both went off into the gloom. Zoe and Doobie walked up the aisle in the centre of the cathedral. Zoe couldn't help staring. She stared at the building that had once been magnificent. The floor was thick with dirt and heaps of rubbish. There were broken windows and broken furniture. It was a mess. Then Zoe stared at the people who were living in it. They were in just as bad a state as the building. So far she had only seen children, many of them younger than herself. "Aren't there any grown-ups here?" Zoe asked. She felt it was the right thing to ask, though she didn't know why. It had been a long time since she'd had any adult help. Doobie didn't answer. Some of the people eyed Zoe suspiciously as Doobie walked her up the aisle, but most just ignored her. They looked underfed and wild. The smoke from all their fires drifted way up above in the vaults of the ceiling. Doobie was right. There was something infernal about the place, and it stank. The worst thing about it was the smell of rotten fish. "Where do you grow your food?" Zoe asked, turning to Doobie. Doobie laughed. "Huh, grow? We don't grow food." "But what do you eat? On Norwich we had a few animals to breed from, and there were the allotments." "There's nowhere to grow food, and there's no food to feed animals, even if we had any. This island is only a mile long and half as wide. There's no space. It's all buildings and ruins of buildings. There's no room for animals, and anyway, you need two of things to breed, right? Two of every sort of thing. Well, we never had two of anything here. There's not even enough to go round as it is, without looking after animals too." Then, as if he'd been saying things he shouldn't, Doobie added loudly, "But this is the best and biggest bit of land left in Udan Adan, and we're going to keep it." He nodded at one or two people who might have heard him. "What's Udan?" began Zoe. "Udan Adan? The sea. I thought you were supposed to be clever. If you're not, then I don't—" "Oh, no," said Zoe quickly. "It's just we called it something different in Norwich. I meant, why do you call it that?" Doobie stopped, as if puzzled. Then he pointed to a dim corner of the nave. Sitting on his own in the dark was a thin, wrinkled figure. He was talking to himself. "See that man? He's called William. He's older than anyone else here. He says the sea is called Udan Adan. See?" William was the first adult Zoe had seen. "Is he in charge?" Doobie swore loudly. "William?" he laughed. "William? In charge?" Then he stopped laughing and grabbed Zoe's arm roughly. "Listen to me, Zoe. I'm in charge here. Got it?" He stared at Zoe, peering at her dark hair and eyes, her long oval face. He was obviously trying to scare her, and Zoe was scared. But she said, "You're hurting my arm." She glared back at him, trying not to show fear, but she felt her mouth quiver. Doobie waited a moment longer, then let her go. Zoe rubbed her arm. "Aren't there any grown-ups here at all, apart from William?" "None that can tie their own shoelaces without worrying about it first," Doobie said, chuckling. "Weak in the head, see? But even if there were some with a bit more brains, I'd still be in charge." Zoe didn't doubt this. There was something about Doobie that made you do what he said, something more than just his use of violence. Zoe nodded at William, the old man in the corner. "Does he know why this is happening? Why what is happening? Why the sea keeps on rising year after year? Where it comes from? If it will stop before there's nothing left?" "No one knows that," said Doobie. "William will tell you he does, but don't believe everything he says. He's mad." Doobie laughed. They walked on through the cathedral until they reached the choir stalls. They were alone now. In Norwich, some of them said it wasn't the sea rising, but the land sinking. Doesn't make much difference, does it? All I know is that for longer than I can remember, there's been the sea coming to get us, and it's left us like this, like rats on a sinking ship. But I'm not going to let it happen to me. Get some rest. Munchkin's getting some food for you. Find yourself somewhere to sleep later on, because I want your help. Okay, so we've been introduced to several new characters there from Eel Island, and Doobie being one of the main characters. Okay, so hopefully you either made some notes or you can go back through the video and then write down some ideas around each of your characters. Okay, focusing on what we said before. So I thought Zoe pretty strong-willed from what I know about her from previous chapters as well. I think she's quite cautious. She's courageous. She's brave enough to set out on Laika by herself. And running from the gang as well. She didn't stop. Okay, so she's very determined. She's determined in many ways. Okay, and something is driving her on. So she is possibly pretty lonely. She's not seen any adults or had any adult help for a long time. And also in that chapter, that passage, she came across as being tired and exhausted. So again, this is going to be affecting the way she is thinking and the way she's behaving. So there were just a few ideas about Zoe, but there's lots and lots that you can add to that list. Okay, now Doobie, I thought he came across as being quite strong, even though he was small. It was like the taller kind of gate people sort of were afraid of him. So he's sort of short but strong. He's a leader. He's kind of made it clear that he is the boss. Okay, he takes charge because of that. Maybe even a bit of a bully, the way he's behaving. You can see that Spat and Munchkin are sort of afraid of him, afraid of what he says, and afraid of him physically as well. So he's rude, he's forever cutting in, he's shouting, he snaps at people. Okay, so again, you need to do the same thing with Doobie that you do with Zoe. So we're going to spend 2 days looking at the next chapter as well, and we're going to really focus on each of those characters' personalities and their actions. Okay, so that's your must. That's what you need to focus on. So you should write down keywords or phrases to describe them. You could take these as quotes from the actual text itself. You could make a list of questions that Zoe or Doobie might have of each other. So what are the big questions that Zoe has got stored up in her head, especially to do with Eel Island, maybe the people that live there? And the same with Doobie. What questions do you think he's already asked some, but what further questions do you think he would ask of Zoe? What does he want to find out? Now the last one, you might think of ideas of how each character sees the future of Eel Island. We've kind of hinted, or Doobie has hinted, that it's his island. He doesn't really want to move on because it's the biggest piece of land there is around in his mind. Okay, what do each of them think about the future? And this is going to be really important for when you come to write your speech. Okay, so you're going to choose either Zoe or Doobie for your speech writing this week. Okay guys, hopefully that was useful to you. Again, check out the resources, they are there to help you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Cheerio. Goodbye.